Okay, we are going to be reading chapters 19 and 20 today in Sign of the Beaver by Elizabeth George Spear. When we left with yesterday's chapter 18, remember at the beginning of the chapter, Matt realized it's been 10 weeks since his father left. And his father had told him, begin looking for us about 6 or 7 weeks, 6 or 7 sticks in, and we should be coming. It's been 10, a long time. Matt has that feeling in his gut just of uneasiness. Where is his family? He's very worried about that. Also in this chapter, Matt, if you remember, discovered Etienne's dog caught in a trap, and it was in the turtle area, the sign of the turtle, that tribe area, and he knew he's not supposed to mess with the traps, but this was Etienne's dog. And so he made great efforts, ran all the way to the sign of the Beaver tribe. The Beaver tribe brought Etienne's sister back with him because Etienne wasn't there. They got the dog out of the trap, and Etienne was like, yeah, that dog's good for nothing, but you can tell, you know, that Etienne really does love that dog. As we know, any of you that have dogs know that, and you just love those little pups. So today we're reading 2 chapters. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Chapters 19 and 20. But there's just 2 words. I believe these both show up in chapter 20. But the word solemn, meaning just very kind of sad, just kind of a somber feeling. And then the word Manitou. That Manitou refers to a spirit. In the Algonquin tribe, Native American tribe, they believe in the spirit, the Manitou, that has great power over, almost like a supernatural power over natural things. Okay, and it'll come to make a little bit more sense as we read this, but just a very strong belief of Etienne's tribe is this Manitou, finding your spirit. All right, chapter 19. Grandmother says you come to village today, Etienne announced 2 days later. Well, that's kind of her, Matt answered, but I'm sorry, I'm on page 99, if you're not there, sorry. But my hand is just about healed. It doesn't need any more medicine. Not for medicine. Matt waited uncertainly. My grandmother very surprised white boy go long way for Indian dog, Etienne explained. She say you welcome. Wow. So that, remember, she hated white men. Of course, we understand why. But Matt has made her feel differently, that he came such a long way to help rescue Etienne's dog. So she has changed her mind, at least about some of the white men, realizing that not everybody's the same. So once again, Matt crossed the river into the Indian stockade. How do you think Matt feels? Do you think he wants to go back to this tribe? I mean, if grandmother say you come, I would think you'd probably go. But I wonder, do you think he really wants to go? Or would he rather just stay in his cabin? What do you think? So once again, Matt crossed the river into the Indian stockade. This time, though the dogs barked at him and children stared and giggled, he did not feel so much like a stranger. Sockness held out a hand of welcome. Etienne's grandmother did not exactly smile, but her thin lips were less grim. Behind her, Etienne's sister smiled but did not speak. The old woman dipped a clamshell ladle into a kettle and filled 3 bowls with a stew of fish and corn, then drew back while Etienne and Sockness and Matt ate their meal in silence. Neither she nor Marie ate till the men were finished. After the meal, Etienne did not hurry him away. He rather grandly played host and led Matt about the village. He was amused when Matt kept stopping every few feet to watch what the women were doing. Matt was filled with curiosity. I mean, this is just all new to him, so he's very curious about everything that's going on. He knew well enough that Etienne was scornful of the squaw work the white boy had to do, but Etienne didn't have to worry about what he was going to eat next day. There were so many things Matt wanted to learn. Now, let me stop for a minute here. So, apparently in Etienne's tribe, the women, are the ones that do all the cooking. If you notice, they wait until the men eat and then they eat. So they seem very subordinate to the men. And so you can kind of understand why when Matt was like picking or taking care of the weeds out in the garden and stuff like that, Etienne was like, that's squaw work. He just felt like the men were above that. So that's just a difference in cultures. All right, let's see. Where did I stop? There were so many things that Matt wanted to learn. He observed carefully as two women pounded dry kernels of corn between two rounded stones, catching the coarse flour on a strip of birch bark. He marked how they spread berries on bark so that the sun dried them hard as pebbles. He admired the baskets made of a single strip of birch bark, bent and fastened at the corners so tightly that water could be boiled inside. They made a basket that was woven so tightly water would not leak out of it. That's wild. I must remember that, he resolved. I could do that myself if I tried. I don't know if he could. For a time, Etienne good-naturedly answered his questions, and finally he grew impatient of squaw work. He led Matt toward a cluster of boys who squatted in a circle in the dirt pathway, absorbed in some noisy game. The boys widened their ring to make room for two more, and Matt crouched awkwardly on his heels to watch them. One after the other, they were shaking 6 smooth bone discs in a wooden bowl and tossing them out onto the ground. Each disc was marked on one side with a band of red paint. When each boy had had a turn, the one who had thrown the most discs to land painted side up was proclaimed the winner, and with much gloating he collected from each of the others a number of small sticks. Then they handed the bowl to Matt. His luck was good. 5 of the discs showed red bands, and with laughter and clowning, the others piled up before him a little heap of sticks. You could play that game with coins, like heads and tails. What was so exciting about this simple game, he wondered, to cause so much shouting? The bowl went rapidly round the circle, the sticks kept changing hands, and presently he had the answer. One of the boys had no sticks left to pay. With a mocking groan, he unclasped from his arm a wide copper band and tossed it to the winner. So that's it, Matt thought silently. Sooner or later, I'm bound to lose too, and when I do, what will they expect me to forfeit? Remember, he doesn't have anything. He did not have long to wait. At his next turn, every one of the discs landed blank side up. Ruefully, he handed over the last of the sticks he had won. There was a gleeful shout, and then they waited. What do I have? He thought desperately. Nothing in his pocket but his jackknife, and his very life depended upon that knife. Then the boy nearest him reached over and jerked roughly at the sleeve of his shirt. Matt pretended not to understand, and the boy tugged harder. 2 of the others got to their feet, plainly ready to tear the shirt from his back. Etienne made no move to help him. Grimly, he pulled the shirt over his head and tossed it to the winner. It served him right, he supposed. His father had always forbidden him to gamble. But what was he going to do without his shirt? It was the only one he had. Now, I don't think they're being mean, but they're playing a game, and they feel like if you win, you win. So they expected his shirt. Now, Etienne put an end to the game. He leaped to his feet and produced from nowhere a soft ball made of deerskin. Instantly, the others raced off in all directions and came back carrying thin sticks. One of these was thrust at Matt. It was a curious sort of bat, light and flexible, with a wide, flat curve at the tip. Forgetting his humiliation, Matt suddenly grinned. With a bat in his hand, he could hold his own with any Indian. So the boys back in Quincy could have told him that. Eagerly, he joined in the scramble of choosing sides. So he's thinking they're going to play baseball, okay? But we're going to read about it. I believe this was the very first sport ever, like organized type of sport ever in the United States, I believe. But never had he played a game like this, so fast and merciless. The ball could not be touched by hand or foot. It was kept flying through the air by the sticks alone. If it fell to the ground, some player scooped it up with the tip of his bat and sent it spinning again. The Indian boys were bewilderingly quick and skillful, and they wielded their bats with no heed for each other's heads, and certainly not for Matt's, so it's a pretty rough and tumble kind of game. It was no accident, he knew, when an elbow jabbed suddenly into his right eye. These boys were putting him to the test. Ignoring the blows that fell on his head and shoulders, Matt swung grimly at the whirling ball, missing it over and over, but sometimes feeling the satisfying thwack of the bat against leather. He was thankful now that he had no shirt. If only he could be wearing a breechcloth instead of tight English breeches. But there was no time for worrying about his clothes. Finally, by pure luck, he sent the ball into the hole in the ground that marked the goal. Out of breath and dripping, he grinned as his side generously cheered him and whacked his sore shoulders. Then, with a whoop, they raced all together through the stockade gate, down to the river, and went leaping like frogs into the water. Matt floated face down, grateful for the coolness against his burning cheeks. All at once a brown arm circled his neck and dragged him under. Squirming free, he seized a black head in both hands, and the two boys went down together. They came up gasping and grinning. Suddenly, Matt was enjoying himself. It was almost as good as being back in Quincy again. So he's having fun kind of roughhousing with these boys. The sun had reached the tops of the pines when he went to Etienne's cabin to bid the grandmother goodbye. She stood studying him, and he flushed under her sharp eyes. He must look a sight, he knew. There was a bump as big as an egg on his forehead, and his right eye was probably turning black. Remember, they played quite a rough game, so he's kind of banged up. She turned and spoke a few stern words to Etienne. With a shrug, he went out and returned in a few moments carrying Matt's shirt. "They play trick on you," he grinned. "Joke." I'm sure grandmother said, "Go get his shirt back." "Some joke," Matt retorted. He wanted to refuse the shirt, but he couldn't afford to be proud about his only shirt. Resentfully, he pulled it over his head. Before they left, the old woman gave each of them a slab of cake heavy with nuts and berries. Her eyes, as she looked at her grandson, were warm and bright. Matt was minded how his mother had often looked at him, pretending to be angry with him, but not able to hide that she was mighty fond of him just the same. Suddenly he felt a sharp stab of homesickness. Outside the cabin, Etienne's dog was waiting. He limped after them to the river, and when Matt stepped into the canoe, the dog jumped in after him and settled down only a few inches from Matt's knees. He had never willingly come so close before, so he's very close to Matt right now. You think maybe he understands that Matt helped save his life. Etienne noticed and commented, "Dog remember." Was that possible? Matt wondered. Could a dog, caught in a trap, even though he snapped out in pain and fear, sense that someone was trying to help him? Could the dog remember that terrible ordeal at all? You couldn't read a dog's mind, but just possibly a dog could read a white boy's mind. Very slowly, Matt reached down and laid his hand on the dog's back. The dog did not stir or growl. Gently, Matt scratched behind the ragged ear. Gradually, against the bottom of the canoe, the thin tail began to thump in a contented rhythm. So he's wagging his tail at Matt. At the opposite bank, Etienne watched Matt climb out of the canoe, but he did not follow. Apparently, this was as far as he intended to go. As Matt hesitated, he lifted his hand. It occurred to Matt that this might be a compliment. Without saying a word, Etienne was acknowledging that Matt could now find his own way through the forest. That is quite a compliment, because remember, Etienne didn't think Matt could do anything, but he's the one that taught him, and he feels like Matt can now find his way through the forest. Returning his wave, Matt set out with a confidence he did not quite feel. So he's looking confident, but he's not quite as confident on the inside. It was growing dark. He would have to walk fast or he would not be able to mark the signs along the trail. He was very tired. The bump on his forehead was throbbing. He probably has a concussion, for Pete's sake. He was sore from head to toe and his eye was almost swollen shut. But to his surprise, deep inside he felt content. Was it because Etienne's dog had finally trusted him? More than that had changed is how I should read that. He had passed some sort of test, not by any means with flying colors. He had plenty of bruises to remind him of that, but at least he had not disgraced Etienne. He felt satisfied, and for the first time since his father had left him, he did not feel alone in the forest, because he feels like he has Etienne's family and Etienne's tribe there with him. So for the first time, he feels like, okay, there's somebody else here. All right, chapter 20, page 106. For the next few days, Matt waited eagerly. Early in the morning, he finished his chores so that at a word from Etienne, he would be ready to set out for the Indian village again. But Etienne did not come. Matt resolved to be patient, but day by day, his new confidence began to slide away. Perhaps he had only imagined that he had passed a test. In Etienne's eyes, perhaps he had failed. So he's wanting Etienne to come, but Etienne's not coming. And so Matt's kind of like, gosh, thought we kind of became friends. It was a week before Etienne came, and the moment Matt saw him, he knew that there would be no invitation. The Indian boy was solemn and unsmiling, looking more like his grandfather than ever before. He sat staring at the book Matt opened, his mind plainly miles away. He did not want to listen to a story. He seemed to have forgotten the words he had learned the week before. "I not remember," he said impatiently. "My grandfather teach me many things." "What sort of things?" Etienne did not answer. "Time of hunt come soon," he said finally. Matt felt suddenly hopeful. Perhaps it was not any failure of his own that had caused Etienne to stay away. Every year, Etienne had told him, when the leaves had fallen from the trees, the Indians hunted the caribou and the great moose. Whole families moved away from the village to follow the trail of the big animals. Matt knew that more than anything in the world, Etienne longed to hunt with the men. He could imagine now how Etienne must have been staying close to his grandfather these last days, trying to be useful and to prove that he was fit to be one of them. "I not come tomorrow," Etienne added, "maybe long time." "You're going on the hunt?" Matt tried hard to keep the envy out of his voice. Etienne shook his head. "I go find my Manitou." Matt was puzzled. Was Manitou another word for moose? "Maybe you call spirit," Etienne explained. "All Indian boy must have Manitou. It is time for me." "Well, how can you find a spirit?" For a moment, Matt thought this was one of Etienne's odd jokes, but he had never seen his friend so serious, even troubled. "My grandfather teach me," Etienne repeated. "Manitou come in dream." Then, seeing that Matt was not laughing, that he really wanted to understand, Etienne went on, trying to explain in his clumsy English a mystery that could not truly be explained at all. "Every Indian boy must have Manitou," he said, before he could take his place as one of the men in his family. He had to find it for himself. No one could help him. His grandfather had been training him for many days. He had had to learn many things. Now he must make the test. Now listen to this. Now remember this, he's only like 14. He would go out into the forest alone. First, he would make special preparation, bathe himself carefully, and take a special medicine to make him clean inside and out. Then he would go far into the forest and build himself a wigwam of branches. He would stay there alone for many days. He would not eat anything at all, not even berries. After sundown, he would drink a little water from a brook. He would sing the songs that his grandfather had taught him and repeat the ancient prayers of his people so that his heart would be worthy. If he did all this, if he waited faithfully, one day his Manitou would come to him. Then he could go back to his village. He would have a new name. He would be a man and a hunter. What would it be like, this Manitou? Matt questioned. There was no way to know, Etienne told him. It could come in many ways. In a dream, he might see a bird or an animal or even a tree. He might not see anything at all. Instead, he might hear a voice speaking to him. There would be no mistake. When it came, Etienne would recognize it. It would recognize that it was meant for him. Well, what if the Manitou should not come? Instantly, Matt was ashamed of his question. A dark shadow had crossed Etienne's face. There was something in his eyes that Matt had never seen there before. Sadness, and more than that, fear. "I wait," Etienne said. "Till he come, I can never be hunter." Matt could think of nothing at all to say. He felt shut away from his friend in a way that even the boy's scorn had never made him feel. This was something he could not understand or share. If he finds his Manitou, he thought, he will go with the men. He may never come here again. You'll come back afterwards, won't you? He asked anxiously, though he knew in his heart that it would never be the same. I come back, Etienne promised. Waking in the nights that followed, Matt pulled the blanket tighter about his shoulders. It must be very cold in the forest. He could not get Etienne out of his mind. What would it be like sitting in a shelter, just waiting, growing hungrier every day and more afraid? Because there was no doubt Etienne had been afraid, Matt was sure of that. Etienne was afraid he might fail, that he might have to return to the village and admit that his Manitou had never appeared. For Etienne, this would be a disgrace, a shame that must be terrible if the thought of it had brought fear into his eyes. Even though he dreaded that it would mean the end of all their adventures, Matt hoped that Etienne would find his Manitou. So Matt's kind of torn here. He wants for Etienne, he wants him to find his Manitou. That's what Etienne wants to be. That's when you would be considered a man in the Native American tradition. And then he would be able to go hunt with the men. But Matt also knows that that means that would be the end of the visits, that they would no longer be able to spend time together because Etienne would be going on the hunts with the other men. And Matt, it's kind of an odd phenomenon, I guess, to understand what this means exactly. But that Etienne, who obviously is scared, Matt could tell that. He's scared, not necessarily, I don't think scared of being out alone, not scared of not having the food, but what's he scared of? Doesn't mind not having the food, doesn't mind being in the wilderness alone. He's scared that he's not going to find his Manitou, that he's going to fail and have to come back. And that worries Etienne a lot. And Matt wants him to be able to find his Manitou, because that's what Etienne wants, of course. So when we come back for chapter 21, we will be reading, we only have 5 more chapters to go, up to chapter 25. So it's getting juicy. And I'm going to try to be brave when I read the rest of this, but it makes me a little sad. So I'm going to try to be a big girl and not cry when we read it. But I'm telling you, I might tear up, okay? I'm just saying. Okay, so that's the end of the this week's work. So chapters 19 and 20, you can put the summaries together into one sheet, okay? 19 and 20. Combine them however you want. If it's easier for you to do 2 separate things, that's absolutely fine also, okay? I hope you're staying strong, staying healthy, following the rules that Mom and Dad have set for you, obeying like sweet little angels. Do Mom and Dad have a card flip system at home? Maybe that'd be a good idea. Those of you that are being a little feisty. Okay, I will get back with you next week, okay? All right, be great. See ya.